There's a German word, Schicht means a layer. And so Geschichte, their word for history, literally means a series or a collection of layers. It's an apt way to think about history, because every time you're thinking about a particular story, if you're reading a particular book, taking a class, thinking about a particular moment in time, that's one particular layer. The Reichstag was a building that was first built in the late 19th century for the Kaiserreich in Germany, and it was where the parliament met, the German parliament. In 1933, so fast forward a few decades, the National Socialists came to power, and weeks after that, there was a fire in the Reichstag. This was one of the methods that Hitler used to seize power. And so the effect is that the Reichstag was essentially vacant for the entire National Socialist regime. This was right at the beginning of those 12 years when the Nazis ruled. And so you have this very important building for the German people that is essentially vacant during that time when control had been seized by this fascist group. And of course, at the end of World War II, the last days really of the war, late April, early May, before the National Socialists surrendered finally, sadly, there was this, Hitler had this decree to fight to the last man, and you had these, teenage boys, 12, 13, 14 years old, who are defending the city still, which was completely pointless. And of course, the Red Army is moving in on the ground, closing in on Berlin. They're the ones who take Berlin. So the Allies, the British and the Americans, were coming from the west, and they didn't reach Berlin until July. And sort of infamously, the Red Army wanted to take the Reichstag. There have been estimates that up to 3,000 of their own soldiers died just for being able to sort of invade and take over that building. And there's this famous image of a Red Army soldier hoisting the red flag above the Reichstag. All these soldiers died for a building that had been empty for 12 years, for a building that had nothing to do with the regime that they were trying to defeat. After the war, of course, Berlin is divided with Germany and with Europe as we enter the Cold War, beginning in 1945. And the Reichstag, interestingly, is almost right on where the border was. So as the wall was built in 1961, the Reichstag is right in the shadow of the wall. And the capital, of course, was not in Berlin for West Germany. The capital was in Bonn, sort of out of the way in the west and the Rhineland. And that was sort of by design. So we'll skip ahead a couple generations to the end of the Cold War, 1989. Of course, the Berlin Wall falls, and the Reichstag there was just discussion about what to do with the Reichstag, and a lot was done to sort of rebuild this government sector, and the decision was made to have that again as the building where the Bundestag meets, the equivalent of the U.S. Capitol, which it is today. And there's an interesting moment in 1995 when two artists by the names of Christo and Jean-Claude, they designed an art project of sorts in which they wrapped the Reichstag. So you have this enormous building, which of course has been damaged in World War II, and nothing's really been done to repair it. So it's sort of, it's standing there, but it's in ruins to some extent. There's graffiti inside, and Sir Norman Foster, the architect, as well as the Germans deciding about how this should look today, they left all of that there, and they wanted that to be one of the layers of history that Germans and other visitors don't forget. This was a chapter in the history of this space, and we're not going to whitewash that. We're not going to scrape it off. We're not going to cover it up. We're going to remember it. This was a moment of change in Germany. This is 5 years after the wall, 6 years after the wall had fallen. The wrapped Reichstag sort of represented, it drew eyes to it. What is under here? And what's going to happen next? Not only with this building, but where is the German Republic going after this unification? So you have lot of euphoria in 1989 with the wall falling, and after that sort of wears off, Germans are asking themselves, like, what's next? What's going to happen? How's this going to go? There were a lot of questions. Instead of this sort of heavy iron dome that was associated with the Kaiserreich back in the late 19th and early 20th century, Sir Norman Foster built a dome made of glass on top. There is a ramp, actually 2 ramps that go around up to the top, where tourists can view the city. They're visiting the building. They're learning about German history and so forth in this place. There's an interesting concept there where you have, I think, in many ways, an American, maybe even a Hillsdale concept, where you have the German citizens are above and you have the government below. And that was by design. It's kind of a beautiful concept, particularly when you consider, a couple of the regimes that have been in power in Germany in the 20th century. Some of those layers of history as different forms of government ruled from Berlin in the Reichstag, it's a very effective place to see that.